My name is Matt Williams. I am running for ASUC President with the Defending Affirmative Action Party, and my number is 115. And today I'm just going to give a little quick crash course of like an empirical example of why we need affirmative action. It's a subject that I'm passionate about. And so I have two students here, and I want to give examples, and I want to present or have you keep in mind that these are two students who are the best and the brightest that deserve to be at this university, and they've bested every challenge that's been put before them. And we're going to look at how race and class and things like that have an effect on your trajectory. So as student A, we're going to say is a middle class white student. Okay, and we're going to say, we're going to look at, say, an inner city black student, just for example. All right, now at this school, this student is probably more often than not has access to advanced placement courses. And we'll just say there's 6 courses there. All right, now at these schools, more often than not, they go without. So AP programs not available. All right, so what effect does that have immediately? These students can come in with a GPA, a weighted GPA, they call it, of up to a 5.0, all right, better than perfect. So let's just say this student has a 4.45. All right, now this student, the best they can come in with is a 4.0. Okay, that's max. Max. Now, the next thing we're going to look at, and I'm going to talk more about it, is the SATs. Okay. Now, studies have shown time and time and again that the poorest, independent of socioeconomic status, the poorest white student will do better than the poorest black student or the richest black student. Same with Latino. So we're going to say competitive. This student is competitive, and we're going to say less competitive. All right, and like I said, we'll talk more about that. Then we're going to look at things like guidance counselors, GC. Now, at these schools, these middle-class white schools, oftentimes you have guidance counselors that will show you all options available to you. They will push you to be academically rigorous, all right? And they'll do things like proofread your statements of intent, okay? So they'll proofread, and they'll just make sure they package you to be the most competitive you can be, right? And a lot of times, the ratio of students to guidance counselors are much lower. Now, example, in Oakland Skyline, which is a good school, one of the better schools in Oakland, and they don't have any guidance counselors because of budget cuts, okay? So they have nobody to help them with the trajectory and show them what options they have. And especially in areas where not as many folks have been through college, empirically, parents are at a disadvantage to be able to help their their kids be the best students they could be and take the most academically rigorous courses, and so you just don't have that guidance. Now, sometimes almost even worse, if you do have guidance counselors, there's like 200 students to one guidance counselor, and they do things like tracking. Okay, so where these kids are actually very often graduating without UC or state school requirements. Chicken scratch Android. So these kids are getting out of college, or getting out of high school, excuse me, and they're finding themselves in a position where they can't even apply to these schools. And because they haven't had a guidance counselor or they've been tracked into these programs. Now, I'm willing to bet the parents over here wouldn't stand for their child to be tracked, and they know more often than not, they know better about what it is that their kids need, what courses they need to be taking. So this is a huge disadvantage. Now I'm going to talk real quick about SATs. Now, you've probably heard the SATs are biased. Somewhere, someone's probably said that. Now, how are they biased? Well, on the SATs, there are experimental questions, and it doesn't count for your grade when you take the SAT, and they use those test questions and the results from those to design the next year's test. Now, studies have shown, now they actually have all your demographics. They know which students are answering which questions correctly. So let's look at how they put the test together. First of all, Jay Rosner, who was or is the executive director of Princeton Review Foundation, stated that test questions selected are comprised of that white students will answer correctly more frequently than minorities. Now, so that extensive pretesting that I was just talking about of questions described by the College Board allows the test maker to know in advance how students will perform on each question. For example, for October 2000 SAT, none of the questions in which minority students on average scored higher than white students were selected for the exam. So by design, before you sharpen your pencil or you open your test booklet, you're at a disadvantage as a black or Latino student. And this was also the case in, I believe, 2005, where out of like 10,000 questions, not one was chosen in which black or Latino students on average scored higher. Now, in my first semester here at UC Berkeley, in my race and ethnicity class, we saw studies, and actually my professor, Andrew Barlow, had done studies, and many of these universities have to show that there's absolutely no correlation between academic success and SAT scores. Now, even the test companies have had to admit that there isn't a correlation. So, if there is no correlation, that means that it isn't a valid instrument to measure one's academic ability. So if this test isn't doing what it's designed to do, why is there still huge money in it, and why is it still being used? Now, I'm inviting you to consider this is designed to deliver a demographic. Now, these test companies can say to the university, if you like what we gave you last year, you're going to love what we give you this year. And, like I said, there's millions of dollars in these tests. Now, if tomorrow the SAT were gone, twice the number of black and Latino students would be eligible to come to this school. And so that sounds pretty blatantly racist, yes? Well, you'll find this interesting. In 1926, the Scholastic Aptitude Test, or the SAT, was created by a gentleman by the name of Carl Brigham, whose writings were used to pass anti-immigration legislation, and he was a eugenicist, and whose writings promoted the idea that blacks were inferior to whites. Now, he later denounced this before he joined the College Entrance Examination Board, where he designed the first SAT, the Scholastic Aptitude Test. So those are just a couple thought-provoking facts around affirmative action and why it's really important. And the last thing I'm going to say is, if you can imagine being from a neighborhood where it is considered, like, say, a bad area, where nobody goes through your area, even drives through there if they don't live there, and anybody who has any type of financial success, your doctors, lawyers, any kind of leaders in your community, as soon as they reach any level of success, they leave. So you have this kind of stagnant pool of undereducated, often underemployed individuals with no access to people with opportunity. And the only way out of there, as far as I'm concerned, is through education. And so it is so important that people have access to education to be able to change those communities, to become leaders, and to return and fix some of the problems in K through 12, things like that. So if you can imagine, like I said, both these students are amazingly bright and deserve to be on this campus. How could you say to this kid who has passed every test that's come his or her way and say, I'm sorry, you just don't make the cut? That is why affirmative action is essential to restoring public education for all. And that is one of the things that DAAP is pressing, is people to be aware of what it means to be accessible and affordable, which public education needs to be. Well, so that's my little crash course. I'd love to speak with you more about it. Again, my name is Matt Williams. My number is 115, and I'm running for ASUC President. Go DAAP.